On the Lord Hut, here Nick. On the Lord Hut, here Nick. On the Ricky Ticky Low, while living #1 Nickelodeon.
You see an orange splat, you think Nickelodeon. That's just a fact of life. It was in the 2000s, 90s, and second half of the 80s anyway. But just because the logo was so brilliantly simple, wasn't a reason to keep the overall branding stagnant. This thing's gotten around, showing up in all sorts of zany, wacky bumpers for the network's commercial breaks, and there had been a couple stylistic changes to the network's identity through all that time. 2009 was a very different year from 1984, believe it or not. So I thought it would be fun to look at all of Nickelodeon's bumpers through the years, specifically their show announcement bumpers, starting with the Shapes era from 1985 to 1988.
Next on Nickelodeon, it's Danger Grouse. No, a Danger House. Danger Mouse.
It may not look like anything special today, but it shows off the creative uses of the Nickelodeon logo rather well. You can see it on all sorts of objects and it still looks fun. They were updated in 1986 to be faster and goofier, and this is more like it.
Coming up next on Nickelodeon, it's You Can't Do That on Television.
I don't have much else to say about the Shapes, there isn't too much variety, but I can take it. As it was phased out, a new wave was introduced I'll call the Clip Era, because they would either use raw clips over the announcement or slightly edited stills in the cases of more retro programming. I'm sure there are people who like this era, but I don't find it that thrilling. It doesn't look or feel as exciting as the other eras. At least each show technically got their own bumper, and that's something that doesn't happen all too often. Moving on to what I dubbed the Crazy Clocks era because...
Hey, what's going on?
Spartacus is next on Nickelodeon.
someone in the editing department was on some good stuff. These bumpers are really, really weird, but there's a lot of kooky, zany vibes coming out of them. They could have been better if there was a more unifying theme than clocks and insanity, since the bumpers are all a little too different across every show. I think they're good, but the only way to get used to them is by watching a ton of early 90s Nickelodeon. The later concurrent era was the Windows era, which I'm naming after car windows and their colored tints.
Superman will be right back after these messages.
This era screams 90s and succeeds in fitting nearly every show on the network at the time, because they had different jingles.
Don't go away. Doug will be right back. Don't despair. Ren and Stimpy will be right back.
I think these ones are pretty cool, and they haven't shown their age compared to previous eras. It's just a shame they didn't last long, being replaced in less than 2 years by the Countdown era.
Coming up next on Nickelodeon, it's Flipper, followed by Bullwinkle's Moose-a-Rama.
Named so because the first ones have a countdown to the Nick logo appearing. These ones are bright, silly, and have a very extensive soundtrack of Nickelodeon jingle remixes that was used into the next era. For some reason, this is the last time in the whole Splat period that clips from the shows are shown, and they don't take up the whole screen either. I can't guess why this is, maybe the graphics were entertaining enough by themselves now, as can be seen in the IBC era.
Don't go away. Coming up next on Nickelodeon, it's Hey Arnold!
I'm naming it after the production company IBC Digital, which did a lot of other Nickelodeon bumpers in 1995. And these ones are okay. They're very, very dated, but you know me and my undying tolerance for early CGI. And yeah, this is the first fully computer animated set of bumpers made, which leads to an equal amount of nightmare fuel and forward-thinking effects.
Stay tuned, Nickelodeon will be right back.
I'm naming its successor, the Colossal Era, after their production company, Colossal Pictures. It seems the theme they were going for was arts and crafts, which is why there's more stop motion in these ones. The Nickelodeon jingles aren't here anymore, but there are dancing lollipops. Colossal Pictures just made whatever the heck they wanted, it seems. I really like that, because you never know what you're gonna get. Abstract Era.
Sit tight. For more SpongeBob.
I don't know why I like this one so much. There's hardly any music, and the most you get is promo art of various Nicktoons, and some of the new radical splat designs the network adopted in 2000. I guess the appeal of them is that they're the most childlike. It's the only one of all these to have kids be the announcers, and they definitely look like something kids would make if they could.
Doug break. Back in a moment.
After this came the Pictograph era,
We'll be right back with more Nickelodeon.
which is my personal favourite. It takes the idea of the abstract era, Nicktoons promo art, and matures it. Every show has its own set with aesthetics that match it, sometimes even multiple like with SpongeBob and Hey Arnold. And the announcer is different from the other eras, but he sounds like he's having the time of his life.
We'll be right back to SpongeBob SquarePants on Nickelodeon.
The Pictograph bumpers are wonderful, and it's a right shame they only lasted for a year.
Stick around. We'll be right back.
The Splat era is up next, and by that I mean a time when they leaned a lot heavier on circular orange slime, and some of its characters playing around with it. Yeah, there is some original animation of the Nicktoons used in these, but it doesn't quite look like their respective shows. These ones are presentable, but they're nowhere near my favourites. Take out the Splats and it looks as generic as the 2009 rebrand. From 2005 to 2008, there were two styles used. One surreal one for less important shows, but the most prevalent was the interpretive style,
We'll be right back.
where characters would be created through everyday objects like candy, flowers, and kitty litter. They usually came under the Nick Extra thing they were doing around this time. This is more like it. They're creative, it's fun to see the characters get made, and it encourages kids to play with their food. The last time the old Nickelodeon logo was seen, however, was in the Lane era.
You're watching Nickelodeon, but you already knew that. Now back to the show.
Design mentalities were getting bolder but more minimalist by the end of the 2000s, and the end of the Splats Lane was an example. I'd like these more if the announcers didn't have these cool voices that made them sound more bored than anything.
Stick around. There's more iCarly up next on Nickelodeon.
They're okay though, and one last hurrah for the Splat before minimalism got to the Nickelodeon logo too. Nick's gone through a couple other visual styles before and after these times, but there was something about an orange smudge on your screen that inspired so much creative freedom across the 24 years of white balloon font on orange anything. They made Danger Mouse a little more exciting. They made Ren and Stimpy feel wackier. They emulated how awesome it was to see Avatar unfold. But here's my ranking of them. Let me know which era you like the most, or which one you remember the most from growing up, because whether you know it or not, that's your Nickelodeon. Goodbye for now.